A young girl tumbles into an impossible realm where animals speak, tea parties defy logic, and riddles have no answers. For more than 150 years, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland has captivated readers with its whimsical imagination and dreamlike charm. Yet beneath the fantasy lies a story far more complex than most realize, one deeply rooted in the shadows of Victorian England. The tale begins on a summer afternoon in 1862. Charles Dodgson, a mathematics lecturer at Oxford, took three young sisters boating on the Thames. 10-year-old Alice Liddell asked for a story filled with nonsense, and what emerged would become one of literature's most analyzed works. But the story behind the story grows murky. When Dodgson died in 1898, his family made a troubling decision. They removed pages from his diaries, specifically those covering the period when he was closest to Alice and creating her story. A young girl tumbles into an impossible realm where animals speak, tea parties defy logic, and riddles have no answers. For more than 150 years, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland has captivated readers with its whimsical imagination and dreamlike charm. Yet, beneath the fantasy lies a story far more complex than most realize, one deeply rooted in the shadows of Victorian England. The tale begins on a summer afternoon in 1862. Charles Dodgson, a mathematics lecturer at Oxford, took three young sisters boating on the Thames. 10-year-old Alice Liddell asked for a story filled with nonsense, and what emerged would become one of literature's most analyzed works. But the story behind the story grows murky. When Dodgson died in 1898, his family made a troubling decision. They removed pages from his diaries, specifically those covering the period when he was closest to Alice and creating her story. The deliberate destruction of these entries has fueled speculation ever since. What could those pages have contained that required such complete erasure? Dodgson maintained numerous friendships with young girls, photographing them extensively and writing them elaborate letters. Even by Victorian standards, these relationships drew attention. Without those missing diary pages, questions about his intentions remain unresolved, a mystery as opaque as a fogged mirror. When Dodgson first wrote Alice's Adventures as a Christmas gift, it was an intimate creation filled with private references. But when he prepared the manuscript for publication under the pen name Lewis Carroll, he added material that wasn't in the original. The Duchess's baby transforming into a pig, the Mad Hatter's unsettling tea party. These darker elements were conscious additions to what began as a personal gift. Alice's consumption of mysterious substances that alter her size seems fantastical, but it reflected a disturbing reality. Opium wasn't underground in Victorian England, it was ordinary. Historical records indicate that the majority of families regularly used laudanum, liquid opium, for ailments ranging from headaches to crying infants. Coroners' reports tell heartbreaking stories, mothers working long factory shifts who dosed their babies with opiate syrups to keep them quiet, sometimes with fatal results. Products like Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, marketed with images of peaceful infants, contained morphine sulfate in dangerous quantities. The casual consumption of transformative substances in Alice mirrors how routinely Victorians used narcotics. The Duchess's baby turning into a pig, added specifically for publication, takes on new meaning when you know that medical reports described narcotic-sickened infants as physically deteriorating, their features distorting. The parallel suggests Carroll was encoding a critique of mothers who unknowingly poisoned their children. The Mad Hatter wasn't pure whimsy. The phrase "mad as a hatter" described a real occupational disease.
Hat makers used mercury nitrate to process rabbit fur into felt, and in poorly ventilated factories, workers breathed toxic vapors daily. The mercury poisoning caused uncontrollable trembling, the hatter's shakes, hallucinations, and mental deterioration. The medical community documented this connection as early as 1829. Factory owners knew, the government knew, the public knew, hence the saying. Yet mercury use in hat-making wasn't banned in England until 1941, and only then because wartime required mercury for other purposes. The Mad Hatter's bizarre behavior at his endless tea party isn't nonsense. It's Carroll's depiction of systemic indifference to working-class suffering, an entire character built around an industrial disease everyone acknowledged, but no one stopped. The Queen of Hearts, screaming for executions, might seem cartoonishly tyrannical, but Carroll was making specific political commentary. The scene where gardeners frantically paint white roses red references the Wars of the Roses, when the houses of Lancaster, Red Rose, and York, White Rose, battled for England's throne through assassination and execution. Historical battles like Towton in 1461 killed tens of thousands. People were executed for displaying the wrong-colored rose, for supporting the wrong claim to legitimacy. The desperate gardeners painting roses weren't following arbitrary preference. They represented subjects trying to show the right political allegiance to avoid death. Victorian readers steeped in this history would have understood immediately. Every time the Queen demands someone's head, she channeled centuries of English monarchs who did exactly that. Carroll was suggesting that supposedly civilized Victorian authority was as arbitrary and cruel as his playing card tyrant. Victorian education emphasized rote memorization over understanding. Students recited multiplication tables, geography facts, and moral poems without comprehension. Questions were discouraged, curiosity punished. Alice begins her journey as a proper Victorian child, her head filled with memorized lessons. Watch what happens when she tries to use this knowledge in Wonderland. Her multiplication becomes wrong, her geography nonsense. Every piece of standardized knowledge crumbles. Carroll, an Oxford mathematician, made Alice's wrong multiplication technically correct in different number bases, a sophisticated joke aimed at academics. Alice's identity crisis, who in the world am I, occurs precisely because her memorized facts prove useless. Carroll was demonstrating that education focused on memorization over understanding created children whose identities could collapse when their facts failed them. The trial scene brings Carroll's critiques together. The courtroom operates on pure chaos. Evidence is meaningless, logic punished, and justice depends entirely on mood. This wasn't fantasy, it barely qualified as satire. Victorian courts regularly featured similar arbitrariness. Social status often mattered more than evidence. A poor woman might receive harsh punishment for stealing bread to feed her children, while a wealthy man faced minimal consequences for serious violence. Sentences could depend on a judge's disposition rather than law. When Alice finally declares, "You're nothing but a pack of cards," she's not just dismissing fictional characters, she's voicing what Carroll saw as fundamental truth. Beneath all their pretensions of order and civilization, the powerful were arbitrary tyrants playing games with people's lives. Alice in Wonderland endures because it operates on multiple levels. Children see fantastic adventure. Adults recognize social satire. But there's something else, a coded map of Victorian England's darkest aspects. Those missing diary pages, destroyed by Carroll's own family, ensure we'll never know the complete truth about his relationship with Alice Liddell. Yet their destruction speaks powerfully. When relatives burn writings rather than let them be read, the shadow cast is profound. Carroll didn't simply write a children's story. He created social commentary disguised just enough to slip past Victorian censors and into homes worldwide. The real accomplishment isn't the disappearing Cheshire cat or size-changing potions. It's that Carroll embedded sharp criticism inside a children's book, encoding observations so pointed they would have been dangerous if stated plainly. The next time someone calls Alice in Wonderland mere imaginative nonsense for children, consider this. Sometimes the most powerful truths can only be told through a confused girl lost in a world that makes no sense, because in many ways, Victorian England made no sense.